Well, hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of Passions Live and a particular interview in our what we call our mini music fest Passions Live interviews. And I'm so pleased today to be joined by Sarah Jane Morris. And I'm just not going to mess about. I'm going to go straight over to Sarah and say, welcome to Passions, Sarah. Tell us who you are and what your passion is.
Well, hello there, world. My name's Sarah Jane Morris. I'm sitting here in my front room, which is an old converted shop in St Leonards-on-Sea, down near Hastings. It's we're coming to the end of another COVID period, another lockdown, and I've seen a hell of a lot of this room. I know it from every angle. I've designed it many times in this last year, redesigned it. But my passion, well, I have many. The main passion that's been driving me since I've been 20, I suppose, until now, so that's 42 years, is music. And what that has led me into is becoming a writer of the human story. So my passion is human beings and how they survive, how they communicate. I like to tell the human story through music. But another passion I've been able to just referred to that I've been able to tap into a bit during this lockdown is interior design. And one of the things I did at the end of my divorce was think about retraining. And I went to the Chelsea School of Art and I studied interior design. Being dyslexic, I found it problematic. So I kind of didn't complete the course. But I love textiles and I love the clashing of colours and patterns. And I'm very, very influenced by the French painter Vuillard, which was once again all about clashing. And if you actually had a tour around my home as a result of lockdown, you'd see that I've kind of created a Vuillard painting in each room with the mixture of clashing wallpapers and colours and paintings and materials. So I'm passionate about swimming in the sea. I've become a cold water swimmer because we live very close to the sea, about 5 minutes walk. And I initially did it to accompany my brother, and I've got 6 brothers. One of them lives here, and he's a very good sea swimmer. And I've met some lovely people through that. But it's so good for your immunity and for the whole sort of your mental health as well. Because, I mean, it so shocks your body. I've been swimming through December and January and February. I think it went down to 2 degrees, the sea, and I was doing it in a bathing suit, and it is freezing, absolutely freezing. But it so wakes you up, it so jolts you that you're kind of ready for the day. And if you're able to do it first thing in the morning, it's like you are so alive and ready. And it's hot water bottles down your knickers and hot coffee and wrapping yourself up afterwards because you really have gone to freezing.
Sarah Jane, I have to stop you there because my sister-in-law has been she keeps putting Instagram and Facebook pictures up of her in this lake a few miles away from us, of her doing these cold water swimmings. And then I was at Media City in Manchester just recently, and they were doing them around the harbour there as well.
Wow.
I mean, do you know, I'm going to ask you this because I said we'd go on a journey. I didn't know where it'd take us. And what would worry me about it, apart from being totally a soft excuse me, my French, a soft person, apart from that, I'd be worried I was going to have a heart attack if I jumped into that kind of cold water.
Well, I think for some people that probably does happen. That it's too much a shock for the system. Fortunately, that hasn't happened to me so far. One thing that did happen, though, was because I need 2 knee replacements, and I've needed them for a long time. And I was supposed to have the first one last February, and I was doing my pre-op to find out that I'd taken off the 6 weeks of touring, because that's what you're told is the recovery period for a new knee. And then in the pre-op, I was told you couldn't fly for 3 months. Now,
Yes.
tour was all booked, all the flights paid, all the musicians booked from 6 weeks to the date of the operation. So I knew I couldn't afford to cancel all of that. So I cancelled the operation. Then, of course, COVID happened and I didn't have the operation. I didn't have the tour. But the knees, the fact that I need these 2 new knees, I had to keep fit. So I've been walking. When the tide is out, I walk on the beach because the sand, once the tide is out, my knees can't cope with all the pebbles. So I can't walk long distances. But it's very much connected me to, nature and how wild the sea can be. But what it's done is it's worn the last little bits of my knee bones down to a frazzle. So swimming in the sea was going to help me because it's you're protected by water. But what happened was, I think this is back in March, I went in and everyone else was able to, it was a rough sea and everyone was up for it and everyone was able to run in to sort of know that there's huge waves were coming to get through it. I can't run. And I got caught in this huge wave, which knocked me straight down on my face into the pebbles. And I couldn't get up because of my knees. And the waves kept coming, these huge waves. So this just was going on for what seemed like an eternity. It was probably only a matter of minutes. But my brother, who was further out, had to come to my rescue. Now, he's quite a slight person compared to me. I'm big boned. And he had a bad elbow to start with. But this huge wave came, took him. We were rolling over each other. It smashed my face up. But it also really pelted the back of my neck. And I realized at that point I could drown in only a small amount of water because I couldn't get up. So that was really scary. So
that's panic stuff, isn't it?
And came into the water to help me up when there weren't the huge waves. But if you can't run, and if you can't use your legs properly, it's maybe not a good idea to do what I did. But my brother said, I've got my swimming colours now. And I did get back in the following week because I knew that it's a bit like falling off a horse. You've got to get back up. And you've got to challenge and tackle it again and not let it come. But the sea is such a dangerous place. And
well, yeah, I mean, we absolutely love top tips on passions, but I can honestly say I didn't expect the top tip to be whatever you do, don't go cold water swimming in the sea if you've got bad knees. I told you these interviews, they take you off on all sorts of different directions. I didn't see that coming, but that's what I love about this show. It could go anywhere. So I'm glad you survived. Seriously, I mean, I'm making light of it a little bit, but
it was I went into shock.
Horrific.
For a couple of days. Yeah, because I realized how easy it is to drown. You don't have to be in deep sea. You can be in shallow water, but if the sea is rough, so there's no messing with it. And it, and I now respect it, and I think each time I go in, I really measure the sea, and that was my fault for not knowing and not thinking and just wanting to be part of the team and forgetting I can't run.
Okay, well, let's get back onto Terra Firma. Yeah. And now we've had a total panic. Let's get back into safer territory.
Music,
which is obviously your music passion. I guess you might get sick of this, but you might even know what I'm going to say before I say it. But you're probably best known for singing with the Communards, I guess. I'm sure you're a lot wider known. And it's funny because I watched a couple of programs recently about the 80s because I love the 80s. I'm an 80s kid, I was an 80s kid. So I love the 80s. And it was obviously talking about the fact there was one year, you may know what year it was, but there was one year where that song was probably the best-selling song of that year.
It was 1986.
86, right. And it showed, of course, the video of you doing your thing with Jimmy Somerville.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, literally within a couple of days, we're organising an interview with you. And I saw you actually being interviewed on that show. So it's weird how how the world works sometimes, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So tell me about that. Tell me about your journey, how you got and how that came about, and
Okay.
everything.
So I had no musical training. I went to 13 different schools. This is my 37th move. My father was forever moving because he was forever dodging debt. We were a big family. I've got 6 brothers, and we were often at 2 different schools a year, you know, and 2 different homes. So it was quite a crazy childhood, and forever trying to sort of fit in. And wherever I moved to, I never studied music. Music was not a thing. And I thought I was going to be a physiotherapist. It seemed to have the right effect on friends' mothers. I wasn't doing the right, I wasn't taking the right qualifications at all, but it just had the right effect. And so I said I was going to be a physiotherapist. I could have done with that, couldn't I? Maybe my knees would be better if I'd taken that route.
Yeah, true.
But I when I was 17, you know, something that you hope isn't going to happen to you in your life happened, and my father went to prison, and we were homeless, and it was a very tough time. My mum had one of us was a baby, and she had to make us wards of court during the night with finding a solicitor who would work with her to make us wards of court to stop the social services taking all her kids away. So it was a very difficult time for her. And I was in the middle of A-levels at school, and I kind of had a bit of a breakdown and didn't go back in. I thought that everybody was talking about me. I think it's because whenever you went into our village shop, where the only way mum could feed us was, in those days, you could have everything on tap, you know, where you paid at the end of the month. And that's how she fed us. But she felt that everybody, as soon as she went into the village shop, stopped talking when she entered, because we were the family everyone was talking about. And that's how I felt at school. So I quit school, had chip on the shoulder, didn't know what the hell to do. Come the summer, I realized I needed to continue my education. So I walked into the local tech college. This was in Stratford-on-Avon. We weren't living there, but it was the nearest town. And I was too nervous to go in to do the usual enrollment. So I was walking around the outskirts of the college, plucking up courage. And I bumped into this guy who was smoking outside of what I then found out was a darkened studio. And he was the leader of he ran this drama course. And it was the first theatre and education college in the country, or course in the country, in a tech college. And I think it was about 2 or 3 years in. And I must have told him my life story, you know, being this, he must have seen that I was a troubled kid. And he was easy to talk to. And he said to me, right, well, you don't need to look any further. You need to be on this course. I'm the leading authority on Bertolt Brecht in the country. Brecht is all about alienation. What you are suffering from is alienation. And you need to come and find your voice and be able to express yourself and be able to use this pain to heal yourself. And it was just, what a happy accident. So I moved into that. And as a result of becoming a socialist, which is what happened as a result of Gordon Valens coming into my life. By the way, Ben Elton was on the course. He was the year above me. And it was before he came up to Manchester. So it was, people came from all over the country to come to this course. Luckily, you know, I had a free place because I lived in the area. And very interesting people were on this course. But it was what politicized me. I joined Amnesty International because I realized that there were people all over the world whose families were, or a member of their family was in prison for something that they believed they were innocent for either the political views or their sexuality. And that was a very important part of my journey. And I remember organizing a concert. I was still 17. And that was the beginning of me getting involved and trying to raise awareness. And from there, I got into both Loughborough to study ceramics, because ceramics had always been something I was very good at. And I'd done an A-level at this college. And I also got into Central to study drama. And I went along to visit my father in prison to ask him which I should do. And at this point, he'd been moved from a top security prison where he'd been during his case because he'd sacked his QC. The judge was so pissed off with him that he refused to let him have bail. So he went to Winson Green and he was locked up for 23 hours of a 24-hour day with the Birmingham Six. You know, it was all a very colourful time. And he'd been moved to this open prison. So it was, God knows, it was like a prison bus. It was a train. It was, no one in our family drove except for Dad. So it was a hell of a journey for me to go and visit him. And I sat down and I wanted to ask that question, what should I do, Dad? Should I go to drama college or do ceramics? And he put on the table this incredible piece of sculpture, which was kind of like a drawstring leather bag made out of stoneware clay, no glazes. And he said, what do you think of that? And I remember looking at him and thinking, okay, drama school. Because it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. He was a very competitive dad, and I wouldn't not necessarily have found my own way through ceramics. It would have been so influenced by him or competing with him. So that made up the decision. Went to drama school, chip on shoulder. Everybody else seemed to be related to someone famous. I'm sure they weren't, but that's how it seemed in my eyes. My grant never came through on time, so I was having to work at the Old Vic Theatre, running the wine bar at night to be able to pay for me to feed and get back. The first flat I got in London, it didn't even exist. I'd paid money up front, and I arrived in Pimlico, and this address didn't exist. So I was diddled out of it. It was someone that I'd met and trusted. And I ended up by sleeping on the floor in a friend's flat and having to keep my suitcase at drama school and shower there, because I couldn't dare let my mum know that this had happened, because she'd want me to go home and I knew I'd never leave. And I couldn't admit how bad this had all gone. But it didn't bode well for my time at drama school. It wasn't easy. And
had you, just can I ask you, had you figured out by that time that you had a good singing voice, or was it drama?
I'm about to get to that.
Yeah.
Because what happened was, in my year there was Kristen Scott Thomas. The year above me was French and Saunders, and the year above that was Julian Sands and Rupert Everett, and this really interesting group of people.
Amazing.
Became friends, and we put together this in-house cabaret at Central, and Julian Sands was the compere. And I remember Rupert Everett and someone else, he was a ventriloquist dummy. French and Saunders, it was their first circus act performance together. And you just knew they were going to go far just from that. And I was singing prison songs.
Oh, wonderful.
But it was the first time I'd really kind of done anything in public. And I got good feedback. But I left very shortly after that. I decided I wasn't going to complete the course. I had one of those life-changing incidents that happens that we're not going to go into here. But it left me very, very scarred. So I couldn't complete college and I left, but I had to get my equity card. And so I teamed up with a fellow actor who was in Julian Sands' year. He'd finished his degree and he needed his equity card too. So we teamed up and he started to teach me. He played the piano, and to get our equity cards, it was going to be easier if we did it through the cabaret circuit, because if you proved that you talked between songs, that was deemed cabaret. So we got some gigs in a pub in Princess Louise in Holborn. And we were doing, we did everything from Streisand songs to Brecht to... He was teaching me Billie Holiday songs, but I didn't know who Billie Holiday was. So I was just hearing Godfrey play it on the piano and sing, and I learned it that way. And I'm really rather glad that it happened that way, because I think if I had heard Billie Holiday, I would have been so influenced by her voice that I'd have probably try to mimic it. But as you can tell, my voice is nothing like Billie Holiday's. But I've just actually written a song about her. But that's another story. I'll get back to that. So we started getting bookings each week because people kept coming in, because I had such a low voice, and people kept going back and saying, "God, it's really interesting what you're doing," and we kept getting bookings. Then I joined an Italian rock band, and I at this point I really wanted. Dad, I think, was coming out of prison, and I wanted to get the hell out of England. And so I answered this ad in the Melody Maker in the Stage, and it was an Italian rock band asking for a kind of Janis Joplin type singer, because they've got a deal with Atlantic Records, and they wanted either an English or American singer, and everybody fancied themselves at that. And I did 3 or 4 different auditions, and I got the part. They lived in Florence, and I'd never been abroad, and I managed to get one of those 1 year, paper passports, cardboard passports. And I went. I didn't speak any Italian. I had no money, and I ended up by living in the same building as the drummer of the project, who didn't speak any English, and he was caretaking this amazing building for an American architect. It had been built into the rock, so even the table came up out of the floor, was sculpted out of the rock. It had a swimming pool. And my little apartment was up these iron staircases off it. But he was a hermit. He slept all day and got up at night. I knew no one. I didn't speak Italian. I had no money, and I was miles from anywhere. One day I was going up this, just before we were about to start touring. I went up the spiral staircase into my room, tripped, damaged the knee. I couldn't move. We were about to start. So they took me to a private hospital. We couldn't afford the time for the operation to sort it all out. So I was plastered up, and I went on tour, not knowing quite what had happened to my knee, but with this stiff leg. And so I started to find like down to the ground secondhand ball gowns, because it covered the plaster, and beauty spots, Victorian knickers, anything that covered that. And I developed this really weird dance because, of course, the stiff leg. And my band call my dance the constipated octopus, but it remains.
How kind of them.
It's become part of how I move.
Part of your brand.
It's part of my brand.
Part of your brand. Yeah.
I remember years later, I was working with Callum McCall, a wonderful guitarist. He was producing an album of mine, and he had done a lot of work in Ireland. And I remember him saying that he'd been contacted by someone who'd said that they had been inspired by my dance, the constipated octopus. This was a bit of a trend, which I find hard to believe. But anyway, I kind of, I fell into singing. It was really to get my equity card to be the actress, but found out that I'd got this unusual voice. And I carried on acting. I got an acting agent eventually. And the way I got my card was not through the cabaret in the end, because Equity kept losing my contracts, and I didn't have a photocopier, and I never copied them and kept that in a drawer. Nothing sensible like that. I'm not logical. And so I eventually, the way I got my Equity card was I was in this opera called The Sleep at the Riverside Studios in London. And it was the year after the Communards hit. And it was produced by Peabrook. And it had the largest Arts Council grant that had ever been given outside of the RSC and the National. So a lot of focus on it. And it was touring all around the country, and it had a big cast. And it was based on Oliver Sacks' book, The Awakenings. And it was before the film. And so I played the central character. And everyone on stage is in my nightmare, because I have sleeping sickness, and I'm out of the loop for 25, 30 years. And I'd made friends with the lovely Tom Watt. Do you remember EastEnders, Lofty?
Yes. Yeah, I thought I know that name. Where do I know that name from?
and
Yes, of
he was still
course.
acting at this point. This was before he'd moved on to radio and football commentary and whatever he went on to do.
Yeah.
And he brought along a friend to see me in this production. And she was Antonia Bird, and she had been a director at the Royal Court Theatre, and she was just making her first TV series for the BBC. And after the show, she said, "I want you for this character. You're just right." And I said, "Well, I'd love to, but I don't have an equity card." And obviously, when you're asked to be a lead in a BBC series, equity card suddenly is landed on your.
It's who you know.
Plate.
It's who you know.
So when I think of all those dodgy clubs, because I did the Northern clubs to try and get my card. You know, I went on in between strip acts with women, you know, going, strip, 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 on the trestle tables after a bingo winning. I did some dodgy stuff to try to get there, but it ended up by being the wonderful Antonia Bird. So I managed to do that TV series, and then she asked me with a lovely friend called Andy Roberts, who did all of her music for her TV series. He and I wrote the title track for her next TV series, which was The Men's Room with Bill Nighy. And but it was kind of more and more music was happening. And I mean, I did do 3 months of the Beggars Opera up in your neck of the woods at the Royal Exchange Theatre.
Yes.
It was over the Christmas and up
Mm.
until about March of 90 going into 91. And that was a fantastic experience. And that was with David Schofield as McKeith. And I got nominated for Best Supporting Actress for that. And that was great. But I'm a much better singer than I am an actress. And I've been much more daring. I have many friends who were fantastic actresses, and I wouldn't put myself in that category. I'm great for those roles where people are really thinking of me. You know, I'm such a strong featured person that there's not very much that's subtle about me, and you do need subtlety, and particularly in film and TV acting. And I know you learn that craft, but I've learned to project, and I've learned how to be big and how to occupy that stage, which is incredibly important as an actress, but as a singer. What drama school really helped me with is it taught me how important the lyrics are, the script. And I suppose that eventually led me to becoming the writer of my own script. But it took a long, long time. I remember thinking, well, maybe Tom Waits will write me a song, or maybe there's a modern day Bertolt Brecht out there that will write songs for me. You know, I was hoping that like Marianne Faithfull, that all these wonderful songwriters would send songs to me, but it didn't happen that way. And so I found great co-writers to work with. And initially, when I started writing, it was like going back to being that 17-year-old A-level student. You know, that's where I had to pick up from. And the more I listened to Tom Waits and Leonard Cohen and these greats, and Dylan and these great songwriters, the more I realized that you've got to observe and you've got to write the unusual. And so that took me to becoming the writer of the human story, because it's what I saw, what I observed, what touched my heart and my soul. And I would then do my research, or sometimes I'd write from my own experience, but on the whole, I was telling somebody else's story.
So how did you come across Jimmy Somerville? Was that just by accident then? Was that?
No, so that's that college I started out at in Stratford-on-Avon. A few years later, one of my brothers did the same course, and so did Richard Coles, and they became friends. And Richard used to come to my gigs when I was with the Republic and the Happy End, and he joined Bronski Beat at the tail end. And he and Jimmy had met through a theatre company, and they'd become really good friends. And then they formed the Communards. And it was just at this point, I had been very involved with the miners' strike, as had Jimmy with Bronski Beat. And Jimmy's best friend was Mark Ashton, who they made the film Pride, who was the lead character in the film Pride. A wonderful political activist, such a, oh God, such a bundle of energy and brain. And he definitely inspired our fight. Anyway, Jimmy, with the Happy End, which was this 25-piece political big band I was in, led by Matt Fox and Glenn Gordon, they had got these musicians. Some of us played our instruments and some of us were just starting. So it was a real ramshackle affair, which made it fantastic because it wasn't polished. But Glenn and Matt did the most fantastic arrangements, beautiful melodic arrangements of Brecht, of Spanish Civil War music, of Irish music, of we did a whole tribute to Mao Zedong called Mao Zedong in Chi, a whole Chinese section. And
Great.
one of the things we did was we collaborated with Kay Sutcliffe, who was the Kent miner's wife, and she'd written these great lyrics. And Matt did this beautiful arrangement and we recorded it, and it became the anthem of the miners' strike, Coal Not Dole. So I'd been busy all the year of the miners' strike doing benefits everywhere and met the most fantastic people, you know, performers and obviously miners and their families. And it was a very emotional year. And Jimmy, and we were doing as benefits, this was after the strike, after we'd lost. And after Thatcher had destroyed so many families, this was a concert we were doing with photographs of the strike, and it was in Brixton. And so Richard brought Jimmy along to meet me. And I was performing with a Happy End, and we got talking, and he loved what it was we were doing. And we started joking about how funny it was that he was a very petite, red-headed male with an incredibly high voice, and I was very tall, red-headed female with a very low voice. And and we said we'd love to do something together. And it just they just recorded "You're My World," their first single, so they were busy promoting that. And they were living up in North London, and I was down south. And one of the last things Jimmy and Richard said was, we're doing, you know, next week we're doing a Gaze the Word bookshop benefit at the Fridge. I lived across the road to the Fridge. Do you want to do this with us? So I said, yeah, but because they were so busy, there was no time to rehearse or really sort out a song. And that was quite nerve-wracking for me. So I had this idea that it would be really interesting if we both duetted Billie Holiday's Lover Man, because it would be the two of us fighting over the same man. And so I sent well, I think I rung up Richard. He liked the idea. He found the sheet music. I wrote out the lyrics. So Jimmy and I were on stage kind of passing this backwards and forwards. We camped it up. The record company was in the audience. It was a brilliant audience. And they went crazy. And within a week, I was asked if I'd like to go to America to record the album with them. Because obviously the record company, everybody could see there was a connection. You know, we looked extraordinary together, but our voices was, you know, we'd swapped basically. And it was a fantastic thing to do. You know, I'd definitely never been to America before. And we were there over a Christmas period to record the album. And the wonderful Mike Thorne, who had produced most of Bronski Beat's singles, and he'd done all of Soft Cell, and I mean, he even signed the Sex Pistols as an A&R guy for EMI. You know, he had an incredible track record, and he made it a wonderful experience. We used this great studio. In the next studio was Yoko Ono doing her album. So I mean, I was, you know, jaw dropping here.
Was this a wow moment?
It was
this
an
thought.
absolute wow moment.
Yeah.
And just at this point, they were having wild parties. We were living in an open plan flat. You can imagine how wild that was. And and one night I had been asked out. I'd met a few months before. I'd done a big jazz festival in Austria, and I'd met Hiram Bullock, who was the extraordinary jazz guitarist, jazz funk guitarist. Played a lot with Dave Sanborn, and that's how I'd met him. He was over. Oh no, actually, he was playing with oh gosh, who was he playing? I think he was playing with James Blood Ulmer when I met him. Anyway, we became friends, and he said, look, it's New Year's Eve. I'm playing at Mike Brecker's Jazz Club, 7th Avenue South. Come along and sing. And get up and, do a song with us. And, here we are in a pop band. My ego had probably gone through the roof. And this cocky woman turns up. I remember being backstage with them, and they said, well, what do you fancy? And there's a set list. I didn't know them because I didn't know the jazz world. I wasn't aware that I was about to go on stage with some of the legends of jazz. And I can just remember thinking, God, that bass player is really drunk. Oh my gosh. We're talking Jaco Pastorius. He was the most famous jazz guitarist in the world at that time. And
your memory recall
Mike Brecker's club.
Your memory recall on names is remarkable. I don't. You've probably never thought of that much, have you? But the ability you've got to recall, and I'm even more in awe because my memory I'm great on faces, but my memory recall on names is not the best. So I'm so blown away.
Mine isn't, but I found out afterwards, to my horror, that I had dared to get up and scat a version of Birdland, which was Weather Report's big hit. I didn't know it was Weather Report. I knew it as Manhattan Transfer. And I was so ignorant. And in a way that was brilliant because I wasn't scared because I didn't know who I was performing with. And I had no idea. And I think they thought, wow, she's cocky, but afterwards I went out and it was the most extraordinary experience. In New York, you've got those, you sit in booths when you drink.
Yes.
And there we all were. And they were all, and I didn't even know enough about this as well. I was so naive in my way. They were all heroin addicts. They were all scoring heroin. So here I was with these jazz greats. And the heroin dealer was there. And, I was 26 and ignorant and just sort of going along with it and thinking, oh, this is fun. But they, since then, obviously I've done my homework and I know how amazing every single musician that I was on that stage with that night were. I think Steve Gadd, is the only one that's still alive from that particular date, and he's a legend. But that's the 80s. Yeah, and don't leave me this way. We came back home. We did the Red Wedge tour. We got involved with the Labour Party, with Paul Weller, with Billy Bragg, with Junior, with Madness, and we went on tour around the country, and it was the most fantastic experience. We used a drum machine because it was just Jimmy, Richard, and myself. We hadn't formed the band at that point. We'd recorded everything in New York, and even from that, with Richard playing the piano and the keyboards and the two of us to a drum machine, even from that, the audience went crazy, and you could tell this was a good buzz. And I made really good friendships, on that tour. And I ended up by being managed by the same manager as Billy Bragg many, many, many years later, the wonderful Pete Jenner. But Billy wrote me a song along the way. Paul Weller wrote me a song along the way. And it was a great time. We felt we were making a difference. We were trying to get young people to vote, to get involved in politics. And if ever there was a time where we need young people to get involved and to think and take action, it's now. With the
absolutely.
We're living with. I don't know what your take is on politics, but I think if a Tory
that's a whole new show, Sarah. that's a whole different show. That is.
Yeah. Especially
at the moment. Now, obviously, gosh, it's just wonderful stories and journey that you've been on, and thanks for being so candid about it as well. Obviously, it'd be remiss of me not to just have a chat to you now about the current situation with the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic.
Yeah.
on the whole theatre, music, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
I guess you've been like anybody else, and you were saying to me before we came on air that you tend to do a lot of your work now performing overseas. What's been the general impact of this whole thing to you and your fellow performers?
So we're kind of wondering who we are, you know, and what we'll be. But that's the case for the whole world, isn't it? It's been the first time that we've all been in that same position of not knowing what any of our future is. Music stopped, theatre stopped. Everybody that worked backstage with all of that, everything came to a standstill. So many people I know were limited companies that didn't pay PAYE, so slipped through the net with government handouts, you know. And you know, I started doing, my son was supposed to go and live in Italy. Italy closed down. He then got a job in Spain. Spain closed down. So he ended up by moving home. So he and I started to do, he's a songwriter, started to do at-home concerts. And the first one we did, we raised money for the local food bank. We managed to get £3,000 from donations. But I got to meet the guy that ran the food bank, and he had said that, and this is the first lockdown, he said that there had been so many more people that were on the breadline that were needing food banks, and so many women that were coming and needing help and refuge because of the violence at home because of all of this. And it's been awful to hear these stories. I didn't know quite what to do with myself, because obviously I couldn't make any money. What I started to do, got a sewing machine out, started making cushion covers, started to sell things on eBay and Marketplace, any bit of furniture we didn't have. You know, I'm being honest with you now, that's how we've survived. My husband's been painting. We've been trying to find different outlets to raise our money that gives us our food each week. And it's been great. We've done it, you know, and we've had some generosity from friends. I've had so much generosity over the years. I've had so many guardian angels, and I'd like to think that I've been able to be that to other people, because it works in a circle. You don't necessarily give back to those that give to you. You're able to help other people. And my life is like that.
I can tell that. I can tell that just with what you say and the way you put it across, and I can absolutely see that. Well, you know, without kind of going on any kind of political journey, because that's another show. But what's your general feeling then about the fact that you know, significant numbers of people have been able to, shall we say, survive and arguably sit at home, getting 80% of the salaries?
Yes.
How do you feel? Do you think it's been really, really unfair, or do you think it's just the way of the world, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not a fan of the Boris government. I think they've dealt with not just the pandemic. I think they've dealt with everything appallingly. I think Brexit is Brexit. It definitely wasn't in my name. And you were talking about how COVID has affected us. Brexit has totally destroyed touring and music for us. You know, we were just coming to terms with that and trying to find our way through, and then COVID happened. So it's a double whammy. Is that
because of the extra paperwork and bureaucracy involved in traveling at the heart of it?
You work out that for me to take my band abroad now and do what you have to double the fee to be able to do it. And who's going to book you when they can book their own local artists? You know, life's changed. The world has changed. So it's very scary. You know, I'm not sure when I'll be able to take my band abroad again. I'm going to probably have to work with Italian musicians, occasionally take one with me that's part of my band. That's the reality of it at the moment. Unless, I mean, I know there's been, well, we all signed a petition, but with the big names in the industry, I know that they're challenging the government, and hopefully it will turn around, because I think they were offered free movement for us, you know, as part of the package, but they turned that down. So Brexit is just a disgusting. Well, I can't find words to tell you how angry and disgusted I am with this. it's also brought about the most terrible sort of dormant racism and homophobia, you name it, it's all bubbling there again. But with COVID and survival, I mean, bit by bit, I did some concerts last summer in Italy because it opened up before us, and they have such good weather, they're able to do big outdoor concerts. And even though they have to reduce the audience, say if it was 1,000-seater venue outside, there would be 300. It wasn't, you know, if they would need to have been government funded, those concerts, because they still wouldn't have paid for what was necessary.
Yeah.
And that's what we're up against, you know. If with reduced audiences, it reduces our fee. And so many venues had got to the point where the deal that they're offering the artists is a door split in the first place. So it's absolutely on the artists' back to carry the chance that you might not earn enough to pay the musicians. You know,
yes.
everything. This had changed before COVID, but now many of the venues, many of the places I was going to be doing a tour with last year have closed, possibly never to reopen. You know, this is terrible.
It's really
wonderful small venues that were vital to communities and to touring musicians. You know, because we're not all stadium fillers. You know, and I worry for those young people that are just leaving music college or they just got their deal. They were just about to start. How do they work their way through Europe with all of that to have to wade through? How do they build up a following? You know, how do they learn their craft, which is mainly performing in front of people, where you learn what does and doesn't work. You know, you dare to be that dangerous, because that's where the real learning happens, is live.
Yeah,
you know, and everybody needs music. It's so important. Theatre, you know, we need to be, for us to not just tick the box that the government wants us to, and to think outside the box. We need to be connected to music, to theatre, to art, to film, and the more on the edge that is, the better, because that's such an important part of the education. You know, not just what we're told we can watch, and we need our younger generation to debate, to not just stand there and say, yes, okay, you say that must mean that's that. We need the young to just be going out there and getting as much information from here, there and everywhere, and making up their own mind and talking to each other. And of course they can't talk to each other because they can only do it like this. They haven't been able to connect and see each other face to face. I mean, that's awful for the younger people. My heart goes out to that younger generation that have been robbed of such important years.
Yeah, I can see.
We're going into the second year now, aren't we?
Yes, I can see it in my own children, Sarah Jane, in the sense, you know, my daughter's 14 and my son's 11, and you know that they've just been missing so much, just that thing that we took for granted as kids, obviously, just that mixing. Even, you know, I never thought I'd say it, but they seem to be even desperate to go back to school when they were off, because they'd had enough. Yeah. It was almost like, you know, I've recharged my batteries, I played on my iPhone, I played on my laptop, played on my Xbox, I now just want to get out and see my friends again. Yeah. So I get where you're coming from, and good. I mean, again, you know, there's a whole show just on the mental health elements and the challenges. Can I just ask you, as you've said there, there's a number of different passions that you've got. I think of them sometimes in terms of layers of passion that people have. If I put you on the spot and said, in passion terms, is there a hierarchy of depth of passion in terms of your politics, your cold water swimming, your music, your theatre, your acting? Is there any of those that are particularly deeper than the rest, or is it literally all of the above?
They're all somehow linked. I mean, one inspires the other. The project that I've been doing that's kept me sane this last lockdown, because I was getting a bit lost. You know, I did record 2 virtual albums in the lockdown over Christmas and January. One is all the songs of the songs of the Beatles with a string quartet, and because I've got a baritone voice, it totally changes the songs, and they've done the most beautiful arrangements. They're called the Solace Quartet from Naples. So that's one album. And then I did an album of taking 80s songs with this fantastic Italian producer called Papik, who works with Mario Biondi and all sorts of people. And I'd done a couple of tracks with him, and he's quite successful at taking songs and putting them into a sort of jazz, soul or bossa nova vein. So between the 2 of us, we chose songs from the 80s. We did Missing, Everything But the Girl. We did You're the Best Thing by the Style Council. I did Appetite by Prefab Sprout. We did a Todd Rundgren song. We did a Simply Red track. And because I'd supported Simply Red around Europe in the 80s, and that's what kind of put me on the map in Italy, it seemed like a good thing to choose a song. Obviously, they're a Mancunian band, but that was one project. But then I wanted to get back into writing, but because I'm the writer of the human story, and it's a heavy weight, I didn't know quite which way to go, because there's so much to write about, and it was all very depressing. And so I decided I would do a project where I would pay homage to all the fantastic singer-songwriters, start with female singer-songwriters that inspired me. So we don't have a television, and my husband, he writes really interesting poetry, and we decided to do a project together where I would read him a book, he'd take notes, then we'd an autobiography or a biography of this particular artist, singer, and we'd then write a song together. And then my guitarist Tony would come, we'd do a live stream, he'd then stay in my friend's flat for a few days, and we'd write the song musically. So we've taken the life story of Nina Simone, Aretha Franklin, Billie Holiday, Ricky Lee Jones, Annie Lennox, Kate Bush, Janis Joplin, Bessie Smith, and I'm even doing a song about Amy Winehouse, because even though she was too young to inspire me, I was inspired by her wonderful songwriting and the impact that she made in her short life. So she's part of it. So this is a really interesting project, because it allows me to, they're all people that have inspired me, but it allows me with my research to really get to know what had been their journey and try to tell their story, but musically in the vein of their music. So it's been a wonderful challenge. So I'm coming towards the end of writing the women, and then the next one will be the men, which will be Bob Dylan, Tom Waits, Nick Drake, John Martin, Leonard Cohen, the list goes on. So it's a 2-album project, but it's a fascinating project. And it's not covering their songs, which I've done nearly all of them over the years. It's actually writing their story, but in the vein of their songwriting. If that's what we're trying to capture. So that's
well, I'm loving that. Obviously, as an 80s, as I mentioned, as an 80s fan, I'm just absolutely loving that, I can assure you. Okay, well, we're coming up to the end. Unfortunately, I've just so enjoyed listening to your story, and unfortunately, we've had to be careful with copyright and what have you. So I've not been able to show a clip. So I would encourage you to obviously to go back and watch the video from Don't Leave Me This Way.
Don't Leave Me This Way. That was shot in a disused warehouse in Docklands. That was fantastic.
People have got to go and see it just to remind themselves of it as well. And of course, there's a live version on there as well, isn't there, of you when you were doing it later on?
Later on, exactly, when we got back together again, when he was 50. And we now perform together 2 or 3 times a year on the Rewind festivals. So along with all those wonderful 80s artists, we all get back together again and go over old territory.
I'm loving it.
The thing that's very important about that song, I think, was it was right in the middle of Thatcher's time, and there was so much to fight against, and we so needed in that time something to celebrate and something to make us feel good. And that is a feel good song. People danced around their handbags to Don't Leave Me This Way. It's still a song that you hear in discos. It's still played because it's a feel good song and people needed to feel good at that time.
Well, arguably, it's just as relevant today, Sarah Jane, actually. Because people need to feel good too, and it is. It's you know, it always sounds a bit crass when you say it's an anthem, but I would argue it is definitely in that kind of anthem arena.
I tell you what, it's my song to Europe. Don't leave me this way.
Yes, yes. So it's got that. It's definitely got that relevance to it, right, Sarah Jane? Thanks very much for joining me. I would definitely, as I say, I would encourage everybody to go out and find. But there's lots of stuff on YouTube as well, Sarah, isn't there? In terms of
if
your more current stuff.
If they subscribe to my YouTube channel, they'll get the live streams, the concerts, and we're forever adding things to it, and it all helps. You know, that's how you can support artists nowadays: is go to their websites. You know, pay the price of a cup of coffee to watch their live stream, help keep them going, because it's a struggle. We you know, unless you're a really established artist with huge amounts of savings, you know, this has been a time where you don't know whether you can survive. And, you know, go to our websites, buy the hard copies of our CDs. Don't go to you know, all of these download places where we won't ever see a penny of it. Actually buy it and help us, you know, buy our merchandise. That's how you help us.
And of course, the massive percentage of people who are performing in smaller theatres, in smaller venues, just because you happen to know Elton John and Cliff Richard, the vast majority is a percentage of the industry by far are the smaller, more intimate performers.
Venues, and they're so important. Those little art centres are so important, because they are about bringing a community together. And it allows these communities to have these fantastic theatre pieces and art pieces and films and music passing through. You know, not everyone can travel to the big city to see this.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah Jane. I really appreciate that. That's absolutely amazing. Absolutely wonderful. I suppose the last thing I would say is, and this might become a great disappointment to you, I don't know, but you've not sold me or inspired me to do cold water swimming, Sarah Jane, I'm afraid.
It's so good for your system. It's very good for your immunity.
But as a salesperson, I nearly drowned is not a good sales line.
Yeah, but I only nearly drowned once and then I learned.
Oh, that's all right then. Loving it. Sarah Jane, thanks very much indeed. And I really enjoyed talking to you. And I've really enjoyed watching some of the old videos of you doing your thing and some of the more modern ones. So I've kind of, I guess, become a fan just as a result of the research I've had to do for this show. So I really appreciate that.
The album's called Let the Music Play, the one that's got all the 80s songs on, and that'll come out.
Oh, listen. Yeah.
And I think the first single, which is Everything But the Girl Missing, comes out in May.
Fantastic. And I love that song as it happens. So I'm sold. I'm going to check it out. Definitely.
Great.
Thanks very much, Sarah Jane. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. You're busy and what have you. And thanks for your honesty.
Stay sane.
Take care, Sarah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.